Okay, so now we have Gabriel who will do a short talk about his framework for custom elements, which is called Elembic.
All right, so hello everyone. I'm Gabriel. I'm part of the team. You know me as PG. You know that in Discord, green cat profile picture. Yeah, that's me. I'm gonna talk about my library Elembic and how it powers custom elements and types. A feature that is not yet implemented, but can be used with this package as a, I'd say, preview. So let's talk about first one motivation. So why does Elembic exist? What problem does it try to solve? And that's precisely why we need to talk about elements, right? So elements, they are something that you're using in your document without even noticing. They are basically the way that you can give certain names to parts of your document's structure. So when you're writing your document, there's clearly some parts of it that are different things, right? They mean different things. For example, if you take a look at this document, you might have something like the section title, which is different from the paragraph that is right below it, right? So this is one part of your document, and this below is another part. And yet, inside of this paragraph, there are even smaller parts of it. For example, the word this is clearly a bit different in the output because it is emphasized using underscores. Similarly, we have like a citation, right? Like indicated by this different syntax here is in the ads. So when you translate this to elements, that's what you see. So the section type is actually a heading element. So we assign this name. This introduction, the word introduction is actually a heading. Similarly, the emphasis is actually the nth element, and in the citation is the cite element. So everything here has a little name that assigns it a meaning, and based on this meaning, we have an output. So that's exactly why elements, they provide the semantics and styling. So the semantics are the meaning, so each element means something. The section title means something, the paragraph is something different. And based on this meaning, you have a separate appearance, right? So we'll focus here a bit on styling, right? So styling is basically when you customize the appearance of elements. And you can do, when you have elements, you can do this in bulk. So you can apply certain modifications to element styles according to certain guidelines using show rules and set rules. So show rules are a built-in construct in Typst, which lets you replace each part of a document with a certain name, with a certain element. You can replace that with something else, but not entirely, right? You don't want to, like, let's say, take your heading and make it disappear. That doesn't make sense. So that's why I prefer to call it redefine. So a show rule is actually a way to redefine an element's appearance, right? So for example, for your heading, you might actually not want to display it bold, but maybe with italics, I don't know. So you just want to change a little bit, but not the whole thing, right? But also, set rules are a way to modify the built-in style of that element. So you don't want to change the whole thing. You just want to change a certain part of it, which will affect not only its semantics, but also its appearance. So in particular, what makes these rules work is precisely the fact that given that you're assigning names to parts of your document, you can use those names to match on these parts, to search for them, and apply certain changes to their appearance and semantics. So for example, going back to the same example as before, we might want to change this emphasis element to actually not be in italics, but actually highlighted. So we add this show rule, show emph highlight, and using that, we get a highlighted emphasized word. Similarly, for set rules, maybe we would just want to change this heading to actually have a numbering, to have, like, say, heading 1, heading 2, etc. So with that, we can use a set rule. So we have set heading, numbering 1, which is the format, right? So you mean like it's a number followed by a dot, and so we get a number followed by a dot. So with these tools, we can actually, using the elements and set rules and show rules, we can more easily customize the appearance of our document without having to go to each instance of this element and applying this style manually, right? So now I want to talk a bit about templates. So templates are one of the main users of elements, right? In particular, they're collections of styles. So they actually use show rules and set rules to respectively redefine elements, appearances, and change certain aspects of those elements according to certain guidelines that they have to follow. Then, for example, your university might have some guidelines for a thesis. So you might have a template for a thesis, or you might have a template for reports. So you might use a template for reports for, let's say, your workplace. And you do this by styling existing elements. So basically, templates are sort of a contract, right? The user of the template will write a document, will create certain elements, and in turn, the template will style those elements. So every time the user creates a heading, the template will provide the correct styles for that heading according to the guidelines that the template is trying to enforce, right? So the elements that the user can use are actually provided by types, right? In the standard library of types, if you type, let's say, heading, if you type emphasis, all of those elements are built in. But what if I want an element that is not in the standard library? I want to provide a new label, a new name to a part of my document, so my template can provide styles for it. But what if it's not in the standard library? If it's something new? So for example, warning boxes, theorems, lemmas, there are many cases of that. And we also saw the need for that in the previous presentation by Keanu. So we saw the many use cases of having this kind of thing. So how can we do this? Well, we can try to make a function, right? So this is what most commonly say in packages. So packages will often create elements by defining the function with some parameters. Let's say a warning box might have a body, what's inside the warning box, and a fill, so it's background, so that you can adjust the background according to your guidelines. And then in the body of the function, you have basically the style, so just the styles, no semantics. So you have align center, so you have a centered block with this fill, some inset, and a body. So basically just define the styles, you don't create semantics. And basically, when you use this, you might, okay, I made a warning box, you have a function that can be used to create warning boxes. So I write, okay, hash warn, be careful, that's a warning, right? But now, what if I want to style those warning boxes? I might try to use a set rule to, let's say, change the background, right? Maybe by guidelines enforce this. And the thing is that this is an error because only element functions can be the selector. So this is not an element. It doesn't have semantics, only styles. All right. So how do we fix this? So how do we create elements that can be styled in bulk by templates? Well, that's where Elembic comes in, right? So Elembic is a Typst universe package that aims to create new elements providing show and set rules for those elements. And it's precisely used for package authors and template authors, right? So then, well, the name is a little bit of a funny merger between Element and Alembic, which is like a container for alchemists in the Middle Ages. So it's like an experiment with elements. And as a bit of a fun fact, before coming here to Berlin for the Typst Meetup, I was actually in the Glean conference and in Bristol in the UK. And while I was in the airport, I found this restaurant which had precisely the name Alembic. So when you look at that, Alembic is actually trusted by restaurants. Okay, but not only by restaurants, also by packages. So you might recognize Lilac by Keanu, also Itemize, which is another very common use package, and more. So Alembic is actually already being used throughout Typst universe. And well, what's so special about it? So well, here you can see how we can use Alembic. So I'm going to give you an example how we might use the warning box. So first we have to import it using from Typst universe. You may take these functions, which I'll explain what they are in a bit. This is also a module. So the first step is to declare an element. So instead of creating a function, use this function to declare. And you basically have to give a name, right? The name is the main thing about the element. You give a name to a part of the document. You have to give it a prefix. This disambiguate these elements from other elements from other packages with the same name. So this is your package name. You might have some documentation. And then you start declaring the fields. So basically, for a field, you can give it a name, a type, which Elembic is actually going to enforce the type. It's going to give type errors. It has documentation for the field and whether it's required or not, which is for the field, which is not required, so it has a default, right? A default value of yellow. So default field is yellow, right? And then finally, you have a display function. So this is those elements' default appearance, and you can customize their show rules if you want, but this is how it's going to display by default. So a center aligned block with the field that you provided, right? So the field and the body. And so if you use it, there we go. It's working, right? It's providing a warning box with the default appearance. But does it do what it wants to do, which is set rules? Well, yes. We can use this syntax, which is a bit different from what we're used to, but it works. So you provide an e.set, you can set a new field, and that's what it does. You can use this, stick this into a template, and it's going to work. All right, but what else does it have? It has show roles, so you can define can redefine my template, a warning box to have like strong and emphasis, and it even does that without using in the implementation any state. So it's actually pretty performant because it has no relayouts. It works precisely using set rules. It uses internally show and set rules to do what it has to do. All right, and rules are also scoped so they don't leak outside of like the scope of the documents that you're working with. All right, and I just want to mention one final feature of Elembic just to demonstrate what it's capable of, which is reference outlines. So if you add a counter to your elements, let's say you want to number your warning boxes, warning 1, warning 2, you might use this e.counter function to display a number, and then using this, you can specify a default reference from it. So you can actually make your element be possible to be referenced, right? Because you might want to reference data as warning 1, warning 2. So basically, this is the syntax, which you specify the default supplement, the numbering, and also this to tell it to be able to outline as well, which I'll show in a minute. And finally, you have this little show rule just to apply some little internal stuff that you needed to make it work. So with that said, we now have a numbered warning, warning 1, be careful. And now we can add a label to it using this syntax and refer to it using @. So now it just provides this default value of warning 1 to the document. So that's great. We have references very easily using Elembic. Also, we can outline them. So let's say we have 2 warning boxes. We show a list of them. We can just use the outline auto parameter, and now using this little bit convoluted syntax, we can have an outline of this warning. So that's very convenient. And just finally, just to briefly mention that I won't go into much details, but it also has conditional set rules. So you can apply set rules onto certain elements, matching certain field values. You can have revocable rules, so you can, in a certain scope, let's say you apply this title to our document, but you don't want it to apply to a certain part of it, so you can undo a set rule temporarily in a certain scope. That's very useful. And finally, it has entity selectors, so you can apply a set rule and show rule onto an element that is a child of another, the inside another, right? So it's very flexible in that regard. And what's in the future for Elembic? Well, maybe some bug fixes. Yeah, always good, but also, who knows? Be built-in custom types. Let's see. All right, so thank you very much.
Okay, we can take a few questions if anyone has. Thank you, Gabriel, by the way.
Thank you for the talk. So I think that once you said that you're basically making use of much of like metadata to implement this under the hood. Is that right?
If I use the metadata?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot of it.
Yeah. And then I assume to actually find out what's in the metadata, you do lots of querying. Is that all right as well?
I mean, for query, yes, but you don't need that. Like, I actually use set rules themselves, right? Like, I actually use a set rule, override a set rule that you're probably not using, hopefully, to add my information there, the set rules that you define using Elembic, and then I can use a context block to fetch this value from the elements rule, and then like return the set rule to the previous state so you don't see something weird going on in your document. So basically, you don't need to use any querying, just set rules themselves. And since I'm not using query, there are no relayouts. So it's very performant. Like, you don't have to, like with state, your document has to compile more than once because it might change. And then, yeah, with that, this doesn't happen here because you use built-in set rules to implement its own set rules.
Yeah, that was what my question was aiming at, that if you have to query, then you're going to have those performance issues, but that's nice, yeah.
Yeah, it's much nicer that way. It's the main breakthrough of it, I would say. Yeah. No problem.
Any other question, maybe, for Gabriel? No? Okay, then thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you.